When you think penguins, you probably picture, icebergs, Antarctica.
Right, the classic image.
But there's this whole other story playing out down in South Africa on these sunny beaches, actually. It's the African penguin, and honestly, things are looking pretty tough for them.
Yeah, they're really up against it.
So today, we're going to dive deep into the threats they're facing, especially around Cape Town, and also look at, well, what's being done to help them out.
And for this deep dive, we've pulled together information from, well, quite a few places. We particularly looked at insights that came out of a prompt on 4irgpt.com. It was titled Conservation Efforts for African Penguins in Cape Town.
Right.
So definitely want to give credit to the prompt creator for kicking off that discussion over there.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Now, the situation, it's often described as, well, pretty sad, frankly.
It is concerning.
But here on the deep dive, we really want to get past the surface, understand what's really going on. Because if you understand the problems, you can actually support the solutions, right?
Exactly. Understanding the complexities really helps you appreciate the work people are doing. And maybe even see how how listeners can fit into helping them survive.
Okay, before we jump right in, just a quick word about who makes this possible. We're brought to you by blockchaincompany.info. That's our media platform. And we're sponsored by the 4IR utility token and 4IR GPT. They're part of this whole fourth industrial revolution ecosystem focusing on, new tech.
Right.
If you want to learn more about that, you can check out 4irtoken.com. And if you're into AI and sharing knowledge, definitely look at 4irgpt.com. It's their main platform for AI knowledge exchange, even trading knowledge. You could potentially monetize your expertise there.
Okay, so let's get into this. The African penguins, Simaniscus demersus is the scientific name.
Right.
Their numbers are, declining significantly. And it's because of this whole tangle of threats, really.
Okay, a tangle of threats. That sounds complicated. Where's the best place to start unraveling it?
Well, I think habitat loss is a really big piece of the puzzle. And that itself has several parts. Oil spills, for instance, are just devastating.
Yeah. Those pictures are horrible. What exactly does the oil do to them? It looks awful, but functionally.
Functionally, it's a disaster. When their feathers get coated, it completely destroys the natural waterproofing and the insulation. So they can get hypothermia in the water or even overheat on land. Plus, it messes up their buoyancy so they can't float or dive properly. Makes hunting almost impossible.
Wow.
Remember the MV Treasure spill back in 2000 off South Africa?
Vaguely, yeah. That was huge, wasn't it?
Huge, and it just wiped out so many penguins. A terrible example of what can happen.
And it's not just the big accidents, is it? Just us being there on the coast.
Exactly. Just coastal development, building houses, hotels, roads, tourism pressures, even just day-to-day human activity. It all disrupts their habitats.
How so? Like the noise?
Noise, people getting too close. Their nesting sites are really vulnerable. If they get stressed, they might just abandon their nests. Leave the chicks.
Oh, yeah.
And that directly leads to fewer chicks surviving. Lower breeding success overall.
That's rough. Thinking about how our presence, even unintentionally, impacts them. What else are they dealing with? Predators must be an issue.
Oh, absolutely. Predation is a constant pressure. In the water, you've got seals, sharks.
Yeah.
They go for the adults.
Right.
Then on land, especially at the colonies, you have gulls snatching eggs and chicks. And land predators, too, like mongooses. And this is worrying, domestic pets.
Domestic pets, you mean like dogs and cats?
Dogs and cats.
Yeah.
Especially as human areas push closer to their colonies.
That's a conflict I hadn't really thought about.
It's a growing problem. And then you add introduced predators, things that shouldn't be there, like rats and feral cats. In some places, they're a huge threat, especially, again, to the eggs and the really young chicks in the nests.
Yeah. Okay, so they're losing safe spots to breed. They've got predators coming at them from the sea, from the land, even introduced ones. It sounds incredibly stressful just to exist.
It really is.
And then there's the food, right? That's got to be a massive factor.
Huge factor. Competition for food is probably one of the biggest drivers of the decline. Their main diet is small fish, the kind that swim in open water pelagic fish.
Like sardines, anchovies.
Exactly. Sardines and anchovies are key. But the problem is commercial fishing. Well, overfishing has hit those stocks really hard.
So we're basically taking their lunch.
In a way, yeah. We're competing directly with them for the same fish. And that means serious food shortages for the penguins. It gets harder for them to feed themselves, and crucially, it's really hard to find enough food to bring back for their chicks.
Which need a lot of food, fast.
They grow incredibly quickly. So, yeah, food shortage hits chick survival hard.
And I heard it's not just how much fish, but where the fish are. Something about the environment changing.
That's absolutely right. Climate change is playing a big role here, too.
Yeah.
Ocean temperatures are rising, currents are shifting, and that changes where the sardines and anchovies hang out, their distribution, and just how many there are.
So the penguins have to travel further.
Much further. They have to expend way more energy just to find a meal,
Yeah.
which, again, impacts their own condition, their ability to breed successfully, and to raise those chicks.
That's like a ripple effect. Warmer water, fish move, penguins starve.
Wow.
Wow.
It's a cascade, yeah.
And you mentioned disease briefly earlier. Is that a major factor too?
It's a factor. They can get things like avian malaria, botulism, and all these other stresses. Lack of food, habitat disturbance can weaken their immune systems.
Makes them more vulnerable.
Exactly. More susceptible to diseases that might already be around, or even new ones introduced maybe by humans or other animals.
Okay, so that covers a lot of the big, broad threats, especially out at sea. But the outline mentions something specific about the land-based colonies, like the famous one at Simonstown. What's unique about their challenges?
Yeah, Simonstown, Boulders Beach, those places are amazing, but face sort of intensified versions of some threats because they're right next to people.
Right.
We already touched on domestic animals, but think about it. Dogs off leash can directly attack penguins. Even just the presence of dogs and cats walking nearby can stress nesting birds enough to make them abandon their nests.
That proximity makes it much more direct.
Very direct. And the rodent problem, rats especially, that can be much worse in land colonies close to human settlements.
Because there's more food waste, more shelter for the rats.
Probably a combination of factors, yeah.
Yeah.
But rats are smart, opportunistic. They'll definitely raid nests for eggs and chicks that they can get in.
Yeah.
They can really knock back the number of young penguins surviving each year.
So similar threats, but amplified by being neighbors with us. What about just human presence itself? Tourists, locals?
Yeah, what we call anthropogenic disturbances. Tourism is a double-edged sword, isn't it?
How so?
Well, it brings awareness, brings money, potentially for conservation, which is great. But if it's not managed well, big problems. People getting too close, trampling vegetation needed for nests, noise pollution, stressing the birds. And then there's just the general impact of having towns nearby runoff, pollution, coastal development, continuing to squeeze their space.
And even being on land doesn't protect them from the bigger climate issues, I assume?
Not at all. They're still completely tied to the ocean for food. So those changes in prey availability because of warming waters or changing currents still hit them just as hard. Plus, on land, think about extreme weather.
Yeah.
More intense storms, maybe rising sea levels affecting the nesting areas right on the coast. Those sites become less stable, less suitable.
Man, it really sounds like they're caught between a rock and a hard place, these land colonies. Intense pressures.
They absolutely are.
Yet the outline also suggested they're really important for conservation. That seems a bit counterintuitive given how vulnerable they sound.
It does, but it makes sense when you think about it. Their accessibility, while a source of problems, is also a huge advantage for research and conservation action.
Ah, okay. How so?
Well, it's just much easier for scientists to get to these colonies to study the penguins up close. You can monitor their behavior, track breeding success, check their diet, measure population changes much more effectively than, say, on a remote offshore island.
Right, logistics are simpler, more data, better understanding.
Exactly. And that ease of access also means it's more feasible to actually do things to help.
Yeah.
Targeted conservation interventions.
Like what?
Things like putting up predator-proof fences, which is much harder on a rocky island, or managing invasive plants that might be crowding out good nesting spots, even actively restoring habitat or putting out artificial nest boxes.
Artificial nests? Do those work?
Yeah, they can be quite effective. They offer better protection from the elements and from predators than some natural scrapes or burrows. Studies show they can definitely boost chick survival rates in some cases.
So these colonies are like living labs for testing conservation methods.
That's a great way to put it. Living labs. And beyond the science, their visibility is massive for public awareness.
Because people can actually see them.
Exactly. Tourists, locals. Seeing these penguins, learning about them firsthand at places like Boulders, that creates a connection. It fosters empathy, makes people more likely to support conservation, and hopefully encourages more responsible behavior around wildlife.
That emotional connection is powerful, isn't it? Seeing them waddle around.
Absolutely. And it makes community involvement much more tangible, too. You can organize local volunteer groups for beach cleanups, get citizen scientists involved in monitoring,
Right.
promote eco-friendly choices within the community. When locals feel ownership and see the benefit, maybe through responsible tourism, conservation becomes much more effective.
It really highlights that conservation isn't just something out there, it involves everyone. Now, the outline specifically called out SANParks, South African national parks. What's their role in all this?
SANParks is crucial. They play a massive, multifaceted role wherever penguin colonies fall within national park boundaries, like parts of Table Mountain National Park.
Okay, so they're the official managers on the ground in those areas.
Pretty much. They manage the protected areas themselves, trying to provide safe nesting and breeding spots with minimal disturbance. That include active habitat management, maybe clearing invasive plants, managing vegetation for nesting, and using those artificial burrows we talked about.
So hands-on habitat work.
Definitely. And they do regular systematic monitoring, counting birds, tracking breeding success. That data is vital for knowing if what they're doing is working and understanding the population trends.
Data-driven decisions.
Hopefully, yes.
Oh.
They also collaborate a lot on research with universities and other groups to make sure their management is based on the best available science.
What about dealing with those direct threats, like predators or people getting too close?
They handle that too. Implementing predator control where needed could be fencing, could be managing specific predator populations within the park. And they regulate visitor access, boardwalks, viewing platforms, maybe closing off certain areas during sensitive breeding times to minimize human disturbance.
Sounds like a constant balancing act.
It really is.
Yeah.
And they also have to think bigger picture. They're involved in oil spill preparedness plans, figuring out how to respond quickly if disaster strikes near a park colony. And they're increasingly looking at climate change adaptation, how to make these coastal habitats more resilient.
And I guess they do education too.
Oh, absolutely. Big part of their work. Educational programs at visitor centers, reaching tourists and locals, engaging communities through volunteer projects, promoting those eco-friendly practices. It's not just about managing the parkland, it's about fostering that broader stewardship.
And they work with others, NGOs, researchers.
Yeah, collaboration is key. They partner with NGOs, universities, international groups. Conservation is too complex for any one organization to tackle alone. They share knowledge, resources, strategies.
Okay, so SANParks is a major player. But like you said, it takes everyone. How can the local communities and, well, us tourists actually chip in?
Great question, because there are really concrete things people can do. For local communities, it can be about getting involved directly, volunteering for beach cleanups, helping with habitat restoration projects.
Getting your hands dirty.
Literally.
Yeah.
Or participating in citizen science, maybe helping count penguins, report sightings, monitor nests under guidance. That provides valuable data.
That sounds engaging.
Yeah. And then there's adopting eco-friendly habits day to day, better waste management, reducing plastic use, choosing sustainable products. All that helps the coastal environment overall. Plus, speaking up, advocating for local policies that protect marine life and habitats.
Using their voice.
Exactly. And for local businesses, there's potential in sustainable ecotourism, offering tours or services that are genuinely low impact and maybe even contribute back to conservation. And community-led education keeps awareness high locally.
Right, making conservation part of the local identity and economy. What about tourists? We flock to see them. What's our responsibility?
Tourists have a huge role and responsibility. Number one is responsible wildlife viewing. That means keeping your distance. Seriously. Don't crowd them, don't try to touch them, never ever feed them.
Use your zoom lens.
Use your zoom lens, use binoculars, stick to designated paths and platforms, don't disturb nesting areas, basically observe respectfully.
Admire, don't disturb. Got it.
Tourists can also vote with their wallets. Choose tour operators, hotels, businesses that are clearly committed to sustainability and conservation. Maybe they donate a portion of profits. Maybe they have strong eco-policies.
Do your homework before you book.
Exactly. And consider making a direct donation to reputable penguin conservation groups working in the area. Every bit helps fund their vital work. And just generally, be a low-impact tourist. Follow leave no trace principles. Be mindful of water, energy use. Think about your travel footprint.
Right, the basics of responsible travel.
And finally, maybe choose educational tours. Go with guides who really know their stuff about the penguins and the conservation issues. You'll learn more and support knowledgeable, responsible operators.
Okay, so lots of practical things both locals and visitors can do. Now, this idea in the outline, a specific community outreach program, Penguin Pals, that sounds interesting. Tell me more about that concept.
Yeah, this is thinking about how to package some of that responsible tourism advice into a focused program. Let's call it Penguin Pals, responsible viewing for a thriving future.
Okay, Penguin Pals. I like it. What's the main goal?
The main goals would be, 1, really boost tourist awareness about the penguins and why they need help. 2, actively promote those responsible viewing practices we just talked about. And 3, try to get the community more involved, foster that shared responsibility.
Makes sense. So what would it actually involve? What are the key parts?
You'd need a few core components working together. First, education, right where people see the penguins. So guided walks or workshops at places like Boulder's Beach, led by trained local guides or conservationists.
Okay.
They could talk about penguin biology, the threats, and specifically how to watch them without causing harm. Maybe interactive displays or short talks at visitor centers, too.
Making the learning engaging, not just a list of rules.
Exactly. Then you need clear, accessible information. Good brochures, maybe pocket-sized flyers with the key do's and don'ts, handed out at airports, hotels, info spots, and really clear, well-designed signs right at the viewing areas.
Constant reminders, easy to understand. What about using tech?
Tech could be really cool here. Imagine a mobile app, your Penguin Pal virtual guide.
Oh, neat.
It could offer a self-guided tour, maybe use augmented reality to point out behaviors without getting close. Loads of info, tips on reducing your impact. Plus, you could run social media campaigns. Share amazing photos taken responsibly, of course. Short videos faxed about penguins, conservation success stories. Make it shareable and positive.
Bringing it into the digital world where people spend time anyway. How do you build the community side?
Through events and activities. Maybe an annual Penguin Pal Festival. Could have photo contests rewarding respectful photography, educational stalls from conservation groups, maybe even organize cleanup events that tourists and locals do together.
Fun stuff, but with a purpose.
Yeah, and create clear pathways for volunteering. Let visitors and locals easily sign up for habitat work or monitoring assistance if feasible. That direct involvement builds connection.
And partnerships must be vital for something like this.
Absolutely essential. You'd need to work closely with local businesses, tour operators, hotels, restaurants, get them to promote the Penguin Pals program, maybe offer small perks for participants.
Get buy-in from the industry.
Definitely. And crucially, partner tightly with SANParks, BirdLife South Africa, other established conservation groups. Align the program with their strategies, draw on their expertise, make sure it's genuinely helping. And finally, you need to track if it's working. Surveys, feedback forms, observing visitor behavior, use that to keep improving the program.
So a really thought-through approach. Education, practical info, tech, community events, strong partnerships, and checking your impact. How would you get something like Penguin Pals off the ground and keep it going?
You'd probably do it in phases. Phase 1, launch. Develop the materials, train the first guides, build those initial key partnerships, maybe run a small pilot event, get feedback.
Test the waters.
Exactly. Phase 2, promotion. Really market it through tourist channels, launch the app, get the brochures out widely. Phase 3, expansion. Scale up the successful parts, build more partnerships, deepen the community involvement based on what you've learned.
And keeping it funded.
That's always the challenge. You'd look for grants, corporate sponsorships, individual donations, maybe a Friend of the Penguin Pals membership for regulars or locals who want to support it long term. And importantly, keep updating it. Conservation science evolves, tourism trends change. The program needs to stay fresh and relevant.
Yeah, this Penguin Pals idea feels like a really positive, practical way to channel all that visitor interest into real support for the penguins. A great example of translating awareness into action. Okay, and just a quick reminder for everyone listening, this deep dive comes to you thanks to blockchaincompany.info, our media platform, with support from our sponsors, the 4IR Utility Token and 4IR GPT. You can explore that whole 4IR ecosystem over at 4irtoken.com and check out the AI Knowledge Exchange at 4irgpt.com. Maybe you've got expertise to share there too.
So wrapping things up, we've seen just how many serious threats these African penguins are juggling. Habitat loss, predators, this intense competition for food, the overarching shadow of climate change.
It's a lot.
It really is. And tackling it requires this layered approach, protecting their homes, managing how we interact with them, and getting everyone involved, local communities, tourists, organizations like SANParks.
It really drives home how linked everything is, doesn't it? Ocean health, our actions on land, even our travel choices. it all washes up on their shores, so to speak.
Perfectly put.
Yeah.
And it also shows the power that individual actions can have when added together. A local choosing sustainable seafood, a tourist keeping a respectful distance, someone donating a small amount. It all contributes to the bigger picture of their survival.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this crucial deep dive. Remember, it was brought to you by blockchaincompany.info and sponsored by 4IR Utility Token and 4IR GPT. Do check out 4irtoken.com and 4irgpt.com to learn more.
And maybe we can leave you with this to think about. When you understand the complex web of challenges facing just one species, like the African penguin, what does that tell us about the broader challenges of conservation globally? And about our own role in trying to build a sustainable future? What other small, everyday actions might actually have a bigger positive ripple effect on the environment than we realize?